Right. I'm calling to order this hearing. This is a public hearing of the Committee of the Whole of the Council of the District of Columbia. I'm Phil Mendelson, Chair of the Council and Chair of the Committee of the Whole. Today is Friday, May 1st, 2026. The time is 11:14 in the morning. We are in room 412 of the Johnny Wilson Building. And the subject of this hearing is fiscal year 2027 proposed budget for the District of Columbia Public Schools, or DCPS. The committee had here testimony with regard to the DCPS budget last week, that is on April 22nd, where we heard from scores of public witnesses commenting on either school operations or adequacy of the DCPS budget. So today we're going to hear from the chancellor and any senior staff from DCPS. This is the fourth hearing that we are having in conjunction with the mayor's proposed budget for fiscal year 2027. I'm actually sort of thinking as I'm saying that because we had a hearing earlier today. So this is the fifth hearing that we're having out of 9 hearings. The mayor submitted her budget on April 14th. This is a proposal for fiscal year 2027, as well as revisions for fiscal year 26, as well as a Budget Support Act, which was legislative changes to the law to support the budget, as well as the federal portion Budget Request Act, as well as, I believe, emergency versions of some or all of what I just said. And the committee of the whole, all the council committees are having hearings this week, last week, next week on the budget proposals for the agencies under their purview. That's what today is about for the committee of the whole. The committee of the whole will have a hearing on May 13th on all of the legislation and all aspects of all of the legislation. So that's the BSA, FY26, FY27, federal portion, May 13th. That will be an all-day hearing. The Committee of the Whole is having hearings on the Office of the State Superintendent's budget next week, May 7th. And the DC Auditor, Retirement Board, Chief Financial Officer next Monday, May 4th, and the Commission on Arts and Humanities, Office of Zoning, Office of Planning, Department of Buildings next Wednesday, May 6th. The council will vote first reading on June 9th on the Local Budget Act for FY27 and first reading on the Budget Support Act and on the Federal Portion Budget Request Act. Second reading on the Local Budget Act and the revised for FY26 will be June 23rd. And second reading on the Budget Support Act will probably not be that day, but a subsequent week. I think I'll leave it there for the moment. Councilmember Henderson, do you have an opening statement?
I don't, Mr. Chairman.
All right, well then why don't we proceed to hear the chancellor's testimony and then there will be some questions.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Mendelson and council members. I am Dr. Louis D. Fairby, Chancellor of DC Public Schools, and I'm joined today by DC Public Schools' 2 Deputy Chancellors, Dr. Ashley and Dr. Bay, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today about DCPS budget. Thank you to everyone who testified last week at the public hearing. We're also really grateful for the continued improvement and dedication and value and the feedback we hear from our residents, our educators, and our community organizations. Mayor Bowser's proposed fiscal year 2027 budget, Grow DC, was formulated to drive growth in our economy, keep residents in DC, and draw investment to our city. These considerations are also necessary to fund the services programs that residents count on. The federal dollars that once expanded our programs in an unprecedented way have expanded and been exhausted, and federal workforce reductions have introduced new pressures on our economy. While revenues have slowed, we are grateful for Mayor Bowser's budget that prioritizes education and investments that will support our city students. Since last year's budget hearing, DCPS has achieved significant milestones, and I would like to start my testimony by sharing a few. DCPS four-year graduation rate reached its highest level every year, and last year that is true as well. Our students posted their largest gains on our state assessment since 2019, with many student groups returning to or surpassing pre-pandemic achievement levels. DCPS continues to be recognized as the fastest improving urban school district in the United States and was ranked first among states in math and literacy recovery between 2022 and 2024. DCPS continues to improve the retention of educators, continuing a trend of over the last decade, with 90% of DCPS teachers returning to DCPS each school year, and then 83% return to the same school. As I shared last year and I share again this year, DCPS budget prioritizes educators at the school level. On average, each school budget is 6% larger than last year. We determine a school's budget based on several factors, considering enrollment, special population, and the need to stabilize funding year over year. While I do not have the time today to detail each of school's budget, I do want to provide an overview. For 90 of the 117 schools in DCPS, budgets are at least 3% larger than last year, in keeping with the negotiated salary increases for the Washington Teachers Union. These investments in school-level budgets mean that schools can hire the teachers to meet the growing needs of their school, provide specialized staff support to students who have greater needs, and pay for supplies and materials needed for student success. For 27 of our schools, fiscal year 27 budget either decreased or grew by less than 3%. There are a few primary reasons why a school budget would grow less than 3%, and I want to be transparent with the council and the public about those reasons. The most common reason is that we have fewer students who are projected to attend the school the next year. This means that schools will not have the need as for many general education as the teachers that they had before. In some cases, the number of students who receive special education services are also shifting or projected to decline, meaning that the school will need fewer specialized roles to support students with IEPs. DCPS self-contained district-wide classrooms provide specialized support with 20 or more hours per week for specialized instruction outside of general education. And each year, we adjust the location of these classrooms. So if a school is no longer one of those schools that host those programs, the staff will also be removed and transitioned and will also be taken off the school's budget. I hope these explanations are informative for you and for staff, and I firmly believe that this year's school level budgets provide the appropriate level of resources for schools. I also want to highlight the capital investment that DCPS is making. We're proud of the many projects that have improved our facilities for our students, our educators, and the broader school communities. Students deserve world-class facilities, and Mayor Bowser's proposed capital improvement plan reflects a commitment to clean, safe, and modernized learning spaces. We are poised to invest $2 billion over the next 6 years in 24 modernizations and numerous small capital projects. These includes an investment of over $550 million in capital projects in fiscal year 27. In fiscal year 26, DCPS completed or will complete 7 modernizations or additions at schools such as Barnard Elementary School, Harding Middle School, J.O. Wilson Elementary School, Malcolm X, Stoddard, Thomas, and Tubman Elementary Schools as well. In fiscal year 27, the proposed capital improvement plan includes funding to finish construction projects at Brent, Burroughs, and King Elementary Schools. With the council's approval, we will also begin construction at the Bancroft Early Childhood Annex and a new middle school in Ward 1, as well as modernization for Burville, Chisholm, Drew, Ketchum, Seton, and Whittier Elementary Schools. Recently, the council voted to pass the School First and Budgeting Amendment Act of 2025. I want to first thank you, Chairman Mendelson, for removing the position check for most schools and your leadership for supporting budgets at DCPS. I also want to share a note of caution as we face the realities of the current fiscal environment. We are concerned about the long-term sustainability of requiring school budgets to climb in keeping with the costs, especially as we confront declining birth rates in school-age cohorts. Since fiscal year 23, growth in staffing for school budgets has significantly outpaced enrollment, and at the same time, our central service staff have decreased substantially. These cuts to central services mean less support for our students and our educators. As I shared today under Mayor Bowser's leadership, Washington, D.C. continues to be a city that prioritizes public education, and we see the results from those investments. This budget underscores that fact, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My team and I are happy to answer your questions at this time.
Thank you, Chancellor Farabee. So there'll be at least a couple rounds of questions. I do want to start out just at the end of your testimony, you talked about schools first in budgeting and the changes we recently legislated. I want to thank you, even though there are some schools on our list that we, the council would like to adjust, that we think would more accurately reflect schools first. The proposed budget is so much closer to what we've expected, and I want to thank you for that. And then, as you know, but the public doesn't, we shared with you our preliminary analysis, got some feedback, and that was helpful as well. And so I'm pretty sure that the number we're looking at is going to, as a result of your feedback, is going to be less than what you had, than what we had originally thought. So I want to just acknowledge that.
Thank you, Chairman.
I guess I'm going to start out with a question about, I guess it's sort of relevant to schools first. So Schools First in Budgeting Act is a law that speaks to stability in the funding, the budgeting for our individual schools. It doesn't speak to equity. The council in recent years adopted the at-risk concentration weight to try to get at equity. Not that that actually solves it, because I'm not going to say that it does. But we got testimony, as I think you know, at last week's hearing about John Lewis and that John Lewis Elementary School, and that the testimony was that John Lewis, this is from the parents, is being budgeted unfairly relative to other schools that it thinks are very similar, Truesdale, Tacoma, Dorothy Height. We looked at it more closely, and the proposed budget for it is consistent with Schools First, but on a per pupil funding basis, it is quite different. And I want to ask your thoughts on this. So we looked at school years, beginning school year 22-23, and the proposed budget 26-27, and compared. The budgets for Height, Lewis, Tacoma, Truesdale all went up. The budget for John Lewis went up more as a percentage of its 2022 budget than the other schools did. That's a good thing. Its enrollment went up more than the other schools. So the increase in budget makes sense. But when we did a per pupil look at it, we excluded special education and English as a second language. And what we saw on a per pupil basis is that John Lewis is budgeted at $1,227 per student, while Tacoma is budgeted at, no, I'm wrong. Is budgeted at $14,860 per student. But Height is 18,970. Tacoma is 16,154. Truesdale is 20,091. Truesdale, 20,091. Dorothy Height, 19,970. Tacoma, 16,154, and John Lewis, 14,860. So it's the lowest per pupil. I could say, how does that come about? But I don't know that that's the real question here. It's what do we do about it?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Chairman. We work really hard to ensure that we fund schools to maintain stability, as I shared in my testimony. I think what we see is a unique dynamic at John Lewis with their enrollment. So, for example, their enrollment growth on recent years was up about 88 students. And if you look at where they were funded, they did not receive additional funding while the school were also declining in enrollment. So if you compare those schools to John Lewis, but I think what's important in this year is they are losing a self-contained classroom, which, as I shared in my testimony, impacts our school's budget. But we think of our budget as one that is equity-based, that adjusts for equity, ensuring that, one, there's stability, but also there are additional dollars for those schools that have greater need. And John Lewis is important to note to ensure they have sustainability. Our sustainability fund investment for them was $278,000, and which is a significant amount that was applied to their budget to ensure that they have the stability that they need year over year.
Well, so our calculation excluded special education, so the self-contained classroom was not part of our calculation in making the comparison from 2022 to 2027 and making the comparison from one school to the next. So we excluded that. But still, the funding per student is significantly less. I mean, it looks to me like it's 25% less than Truesdale. Now, Truesdale's lost student population. Over those 4 years, its population has dropped 14%, while Lewis has increased 38.2% in population. But the growth, as I noted this earlier, for Lewis is greater. It's 63.7% compared to Truesdale, but Truesdale went up 25.4%, meaning that while the per pupil budget is lower than it was, it's still significantly higher, it's $20,000 compared to 14,000.
Yeah, I think one thing to note here is you compare those two schools over time is both schools transition from education campuses to traditional elementary schools. And at the same time, going back to fiscal year 2022, John Lewis grew in enrollment and Truesdale actually decreased in enrollment. So again, if you think about what gets baked into schools first in budgeting, we believe that it's really difficult to compare those two. I don't know, Dr. Ashley, you want to share a little bit more context, but I think it's difficult to compare schools that are growing and declining enrollment. And when you think about baking into the stability that we want to achieve for both schools and how they're funded.
Yeah, I think the chancellor's right. And that's part of the byproduct of schools first and budgeting as a policy mechanism is that it promotes stability in terms of funding, but it doesn't promote stability in the same way as we're seeing the population of students. And so when you see a stable funding go up, when you see a stable funding, but students go down, you're going to drive up the per student cost. And I think this is the reality is like we have to balance a finite budget in terms of resources. And so what we end up seeing is that we do see some disparities in resources throughout the system because we're baking in some higher per student calculations or higher per student numbers at certain schools. And we'd love to be able to do that across the entire system. But the reality is like we are operating in a finite system.
Well, I think it's a little unfair to blame schools first. Schools first is about stability. Let me just remind you, like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 80 schools were filling this room, complaining and screaming about how many teachers they were going to have to lay off. 80 schools. And we're not hearing that anymore. It is about stability, but the discrepancy in per pupil is one that has existed. It's less now than it was 4 years ago for these schools, but still it predates Schools First. And Schools First does allow for reductions in budgeting if there's enough of an enrollment drop that Schools First explicitly authorizes reducing a school's budget. And the Schools First law is very clear that if you wanted to, I'm going to say this recognizing that you don't have lots of money to do this, but if you wanted to, you could just increase John Lewis's budget by more because Schools First doesn't prevent that.
Yeah, and Chairman, I hope you didn't mishear me. We're not blaming schools first in budgeting of it, but it
Good.
is a byproduct of that in a finite environment. Is that some of those dollars that could go to boost the per student dollar amount of John Lewis are actually going to other schools that are being stabilized, right? Because better than most, there's only so much money within the entire
And it's
spectrum.
important that there's stability.
Correct. Yep. And so I think that's the balancing act, right? And that's what we've been trying to achieve with trying to make sure that we're still initially starting with our equity-based model and then adding on top of that stability funding. And so that we are trying to drive dollars, recognizing that we're in a finite financial environment.
Well, this is going to be increasingly a look or a focus of the committee. As I've said, it's important to stabilize schools, but then we want to do more for equity. I have one more question, and I'll turn to my colleague, and that is, did DCPS consider or submit any budget enhancement requests with respect to FY27? So I'll start with, did you consider any budget enhancement requests?
We did, and we baked into our budget some enhancements to support the implementation of artificial intelligence in the district. We also established some FTEs to support that. We also included additional dollars to support extracurricular and after-school programming at our elementary and middle schools. And so we did think about ways in which we needed additional resources to support our students and families.
So did you submit any requests for enhancements, any enhancement requests?
We
Go ahead.
Yeah. We did not submit any request to the mayor's office. We did fund some enhancements within our own budget. We made some trade-offs within our budgets to be able to afford some of the things that the chancellor highlighted.
Okay. So you did consider enhancement requests. You funded them within your budget. You did not submit any enhancement requests to the mayor.
Correct.
I don't know that we have this. Can you give us a table that shows where you did these enhancements?
Yes, in our budget materials, as a part of our budget allocation to schools, we shared what our enhancements are for this year, but we're happy to give you that information.
If you could, I find the tables in the budget book sometimes very hard to, because they have like very general terms like increase for programmatic enhancements. What the heck is that? So if you could give us, if you could go so far as to include attributes?
Sure, we can share those.
Okay, and I assume soon.
Sure, yeah.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually want to start on a conversation about at-risk enrollment projections. So overall, the mayor's budget decreased risk student funding by about 7.2 million. This is for DCPS. The school year 26-27 enrollment projections for DCPS suggest that there would be about a 2,000 student at-risk student designation decline in the upcoming school year. But in comparison, for public charter schools, their enrollment of at-risk students remain relatively flat. So then I have to sort of ask the question, are we actually losing 2,000 students, or is something else kind of going on here? Or was this a right sizing in terms of what happened in this current school year?
Yeah, so I think we saw an interesting dynamic going into this school year that we hadn't seen in previous years.
This school year, as in
And
this,
the 25-26 school
Okay.
year, you recall that we had been the only urban school district really in this region and nationally that was growing in enrollment.
Mhm.
We saw a shift in that this current school year where we did not meet our projected enrollment and didn't see the types of increases in enrollment that we saw in the past. Our projection for this upcoming school year, the 26-27 school year, is expected to be a higher number of students, but the projection to projection comparison will reflect a decrease. We do see some indication that there are less at-risk students. If you look at the projected enrollment for DCPS for the 26-27 school.
Okay, so if the students are not at DCPS and they haven't left charters they're not moving to charters, right? Because the charter school enrollment projection for at-risk for next school year is the same. Are you saying that the whole city is losing 2,000 students?
Well, I think we're going to see next school year, very likely that we will have less students in the system overall between both DCPS and public charter schools. Just given the current decline in birth rates, what we see in our current cohorts, our data suggests that there are likely among those numbers less at-risk students in DCPS. I can't speak to the specifics to what is in the numbers for the public charter schools, but
Yep.
that's what we're seeing in our numbers.
Okay, did you all take into account some of the changes that were coming to some of these public benefit programs, right? So under the current definition of at-risk, it's a student who is either homeless in foster care, qualifies for TANF or SNAP, and is older than the typical grade for which they are enrolled. SNAP work requirements are currently in effect. So that's going to impact next school year. And right now, according to Department of Human Services, right, I've got 17,000 families who are out of compliance who no longer are SNAP eligible. So if we think about that sort of going forward, we're going to have students for whom their economics has not changed. Their current family situation has not changed, but the federal government is saying, due to these work requirements, you are no longer eligible for this particular program. Did you all take that into account in terms of this budget formulation? Because I feel like it's something we have to think about in the future, because qualifying for TANF and SNAP, yes, on paper, you may not qualify based on this one sort of requirement, but in fact, economically speaking, you should qualify.
Yeah, we have been tracking those changes. For example, we've been talking recently about the impact on things like aftercare because it's associated with those benefits and families might not have access to the benefit. I think one dynamic, I'll go back to your question about the charter space. I do think there's been expansion of adult education services in the charter space, which I think changed the complexity of the numbers. But again, in terms of determining the exact number of at-risk students, that's not a direct, allocation or projection responsibility that DCPS has, but we do ensure that we inform our families of what's coming down the pipe in terms of the changes in terms of TANF and SNAP.
I know. So now I'm asking this question in terms of you, Chancellor, as a member of the mayor's cabinet in these sort of conversations, because again, it's not just around at-risk funding, although that impacts your school budgets, to be clear, right? A change of 50 or so students designation, that's a loss of several thousands of dollars. It could be even a loss of a staff position or a teacher. But then it also changes the ability for someone to qualify for programs that they definitely need, like after-school funding, et cetera. Is there anything in this budget that essentially provides a cushion? Because we know that there are going to be, so let's take, for example, the end of this school year, or I guess at some point, I haven't gotten an email yet, but at some point you guys are going to open up the portal to say, sign up for after school for school year 26-27. There are probably a number of families for whom they've already lost their SNAP benefits because that is already in effect. So they don't qualify for after school, but they need after school. What contingencies are we making available for school year 26-27 so that those families still have supports?
Well, we have contingency dollars that we set aside to support schools throughout the school year. Again, these changes, if I think about when the changes were made and the timing of the projections, I believe the changes to TANF and SNAP were made after the projections were made. But I think if we determine that there's a misalignment with what we see in need and how schools are allocated, we will certainly utilize the resources we have set aside to support schools where there's shift in enrollment or additional needs identified during the school year. I think if there's a significant misalignment, we would certainly have to bake that into what we share with city leadership in terms of planning for next year's fiscal year budget and allocation.
I'll tell you the EOM knew this because HR1 been law, right? So we've known, I've been asking for months, hey guys, what are you doing to help all these people who now have work requirements actually meet the requirements so that they don't lose all of their particular benefits? And on top of that, compounded, right? Because I got work requirements coming for Medicaid starting in January. So we've got a significant number of people, families, households, et cetera, who are about to lose federal supports that are now tied to local benefits, particularly from the education space. And it's very discomforting to me that you guys haven't been having that conversation because it's going to impact your schools in 26-27.
No, we didn't have any conversation. I just don't believe that there's any indication now that schools don't have the appropriate resources they need to support their student population.
Okay. Let's talk about English language learners or multilingual learners. The budget proposes cutting funding for English language learners by 4.2 million. Was this a result of a projected decrease in enrollment, you feel like, for that student population?
Yes, so a couple groups when we talk about the at-risk population, the other is multilingual learners. We're not seeing the same numbers that we've had historically in the past in terms of the resources and dollars needed to support that particular population of students.
What's our projected enrollment decrease for 26-27?
I had to get that number to you in terms of the number. You're asking how many less multilingual learner students? Yeah, we'll get that number to you.
Okay. I mean, I guess in sort of that same vein, I'm going to ask about Harriet Tubman because I pass it every day. I know that Harriet Tubman had a enrollment decline this school year and maybe the school year prior because they were swinging all of 5 blocks, but it's fine. It's a nice, big, beautiful building.
It is.
And it looks like they're working really hard to finish it on time. Yay, DGS. And their contractors. How does this school budget for Harriet Tubman reflect, or does it reflect you all's belief that those families are going to come back with the new building?
Yeah, so it does, I believe, fairly project their enrollment for this coming school year. But as a part of our budget development process, we added an additional feature this year to support schools that are swinging so they could request additional dollars, given some of the challenges that schools raise with enrollment or other needs that the school may have that are in transition.
Is that sitting at Central or this additional?
Yeah, so it is similar to our budget assistance process.
Okay.
We give schools the opportunity who are swinging to request additional dollars. We evaluate all those requests and then we allocate those dollars to schools. And that is held centrally, but is awarded to schools.
Okay. I don't have enough time to get off another question. I'll have another round.
Yeah, but for Tubman, we're anticipating a slight increase, but we're continuing to monitor the enrollment over the summer because sometimes we do see when a school opens from a modernization that they have a large increase in their enrollment.
Okay. I want to name and sort of recognize, since August of last year, the city has gone through a lot. Certain communities have gone through a lot, particularly I think it's impacted a lot of our English language learner families, our multilingual families, in terms of some of the enrollment declines there. But I want to make sure that not all the resources are going away should things shift, and trust be rebuilt, although I know that happens over a long period of time.
So the projected number of students to decrease for multilingual learners is around 600 students.
600 students.
Correct.
Wow. Okay. I guess similar, but a little bit different. Last year, when we asked you about the capacity of DCPS to strengthen the dual language program, you all said you needed more time to finalize and expand the programs. Now, the mayor is proposing cutting significant funds for multilingual learners in the dual language budget. So what happened in the last year? Do we still have
For dual language?
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
I mean, to sort of get this shift, like last year we were like, let's expand. And now we're like, go back.
Yeah, so we still are going to expand our dual language programming. We believe that, regardless of the shifts in the multilingual learning student population, there's still significant interest in, learning languages, and we see significant interest in expanding into our middle school space for those elementary students that have that experience. I'll turn to Dr. Bates. She can share a little bit more about the programming that will be established at Jefferson Middle School to support families that are currently in elementary dual language programming and how we're building that out. And we're also
Wait, why'd you guys as Dr. Bay responds, I would love to understand how Jefferson was selected. Is it because of
it's the feeder
academy, the feeder for whom?
The feeder elementary schools that would feed into that middle school.
There was a lot of demand from Chisholm, among others.
Yeah, and my thought was Chisholm wanted to become an education campus, but keep going, go ahead.
Yeah, we want to become an education campus. If I could, we wouldn't have any education campus because it is extremely difficult to fund the middle grades and provide the appropriate support. So we shifted our focus to middle school, and Jefferson Middle School plan was well received by the school community.
Good morning. Good morning. Yes, thank you, Chancellor. So as the Chancellor mentioned, Jefferson currently offers humanities across 6 through 8 Spanish humanities. And so we thought it would be a great fit in terms of enhancing what they already have with actually building out a full strand dual language program, very similar to what we have at McFarland. So next year, they'll continue to offer the Spanish humanity courses that they currently offer. We are providing some additional assistance in terms of helping the school to establish an administrator who is over the dual language program. And we will actually launch in 27-28, the first cohort that will continue with Spanish humanities, as well as one of the additional core content areas in Spanish, which is similar to the middle school program that we have at McFarland. So we're super excited to be able to build that out, to be able to accommodate families that want to continue with dual language.
Okay. How do you think the strength of that model compares to the middle school experience at DC International?
Yeah, we haven't.
I'm not as familiar with.
Right. I know that you guys don't want to do the comparisons, but that's really the comparisons, right? Like
Yeah.
all of these language.
You should talk to the families at DCI.
Yes. Put that to the side.
Yeah.
I've gotten those emails, but what I'm talking about isn't from a curriculum standpoint of what I hear a lot of DCPS families who are in the dual language wanting is like a true dual language experience on the middle grades. And so that's why I'm just asking how the Spanish humanities plus an additional core subject from a curriculum standpoint, not an operation standpoint of what's happening in that school building, but from a curriculum standpoint, can we make comparisons? I'm way over my time. Sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Chairman. Sorry.
Yeah, but do you want an answer to that?
I think they're going to say they haven't done that comparison.
Yeah, we haven't spent a lot of time at DCI. I would say it's comparable, but we're happy to talk more with Dr. Walker Davis and see if she has a perspective that we can learn from.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember. So I want to come back to the enrollment projections. So this was touched on by Councilmember Henderson. The percentage of DCPS at-risk students is decreasing in your projections. Why?
Yeah, so my theory is if you look at where we're seeing less school-age children in DCPS enrollment, they're in communities where there is greater saturation of school options. And I think that where we see families that are typically not at large at-risk population, we don't see that same dynamic. But I think it's something that we need to continue to monitor closely. I think it also could be we just have less potentially at-risk school-age children in the city as well. But I think those are dynamics that we need to continue to analyze.
So when Councilmember Henderson was asking the questions, what I was hearing was, well, eligibility requirements are changing, and so there would be fewer folks who would meet the definition of at-risk, since our definition predates the changes in federal. But you're not saying that.
Yeah, I think when the projections were made, I don't believe, again, I'm not sure y'all have asked Deputy Mayor about the projections, but I don't believe when the projections were made that the changes in TANF and SNAP were a part of that
Well, so
consideration.
you're involved in the projectioning, correct?
We provide data, but we don't actually develop the projections.
But there's some iterative process. There's some participation on your part. What strikes me is that the at-risk population in the enrollment projections for DCPS is decreasing, but for charter schools, it's flat. And I think I heard you suggested maybe there are fewer at-risk students in the areas where DCPS is competing more with charters. Well, okay, but then the charters should see drop as well. So why is it DCPS?
Yeah, I gave you my theory. I think those are areas that we need to continue to analyze once we have students actually in the building next school year. I also mentioned earlier that there are more adult learning spaces in the public charter school sector that is not in DCPS. I think that could be a reason for the data, but
I'm not getting that because adult students aren't in the at-risk calculation. I don't
okay.
think. It's a separate.
Maybe they're getting the overage and they're not the at risk.
Let me go to a different question, although I'm going to pause. Councilmember Henderson, do you want any follow-up on that? On the enrollment question, the at-risk question? Underspending. So, gosh, I remember every year, I think what I hear from you as we're developing the budget is that we're cutting your budget too much. Last year, DCPS underspent its budget by about $25 million. Our analysis shows significant underspending in ESL positions and positions funded with at-risk dollars, like aides, assistant principals, behavioral techs. Was this underspending in ESL positions the result of vacancies?
Yeah, I think largely, I think if we zoom out from the individual positions, what happened here was that we received, we talked about this as part of performance oversight hearing, we received a large lump sum payment from Medicaid that actually arrived after the fiscal year ended, but was recognized in the previous fiscal year. And so a lot of expenditures got journaled over, sort of en masse over to that payment because we have to liquidate federal payments first, and then that allows local funds to be then freed up. And so some of that it has to do with just the fact of just like costs were identified by OCFO, moved over onto those federal payments. We very aggressively, as you know, and we're very proud of, is the fact that we hire aggressively and really work to reduce vacancies at our schools. And so I think that's largely what you're seeing is some of the journaling exercise that happened.
But you expected that money. It was Medicaid money.
Yeah, so it's actually something we're glad this year. So we've had a lot of productive conversations with OCFO and their OBP, as well as the Mayor's Office of Budget. Is we previously haven't recognized the fixed cost, the audit, the lump sum payment. What we have budgeted for previously was the reimbursements that we received. And so generally what happens is we don't know the timing of that, and we're not able to spend those dollars. This year in FY27, we're actually have budget authority in the budget built in so that we're able to better plan for and allocate expenditures against those resources so that when the actual money comes in, we don't have this journaling exercise that happens.
But you expected that the Medicaid reimbursements would come in.
We expected the reimbursements to come in. We also expect that the lump sum payment will come in, but when the timing of it, we've had a lot of variation of in which fiscal year that has been recognized. Some years it's been recognized in the year that it is received. Some year has been when the audit was conducted. And so what we've been working with now is making sure that we have alignment between OBP, OBPM, and all of our teams to make sure we understand where that revenue is.
So
going to
is
be.
there a difference between Medicaid reimbursements and this lump sum payment? 'Cause
Correct.
What's the
Yes.
difference?
Yeah, so you can think about reimbursements are, payments that are coming in on a routine basis for services. And then there's a time audit that's conducted as part of the Medicaid reimbursement process that trues up our overall expenditures. That's done at a later date and looks back a couple of fiscal years. And so, for example, the money we received, I think this year was in FY24. And then the audit's done in 25, and then we received the payment in 26. And so some of it is routine reimbursement requests that we're making, and then some of it is actually looking at the expenditures.
And does the lump sum always come in October or?
It does not. And that has been the challenge for us, and that has been the challenge that we have had with the accounting folks about where does this revenue get recognized? Because as I mentioned, these are looking at expenditures that were made in
Well,
FY.
yeah, but hold on. So I don't care when it's recognized at the moment. In my question, it's more your ability to plan around it coming in. So what I'm hearing from you is that some years it comes in September, some years in October, and
Some years
some years
December.
in December.
Correct.
And so that makes it difficult for you to plan around.
Correct.
Did you have any inkling last year when you were going to get it?
We did not. We saw the finalized report. And again, this actually, the actual cash came in after the conclusion of the fiscal year.
Yeah, but
and-
it was, you said credited against FY25.
Correct. Yes.
And so what I'm hearing from you is, I'll put this differently, your testimony is that you did not know when it was going to come in, and so you couldn't spend against it.
We would be anti-deficient at that point.
Well, Lord help us if anybody overspends and is anti-deficient.
And so I think, and it does matter of when that revenue is recognized in order for us to be able to spend against it. And so now we've come to an agreement with OCFO about, that we will have budget authority because there is confidence that that money is coming in at some point, and then they can recognize that revenue against that budget.
Of course, it is a truing up, so
It is.
theoretically, it could be a negative as opposed to a positive. That is, that you're charged.
It has never been a negative. I'm not sure I totally understand that if it is possible to be a negative, but
Well, if they're truing up, they could say they've already reimbursed you more than you should have.
theoretically, I believe you're correct, but would have to confirm.
But that hasn't happened. So how much was the lump sum payment?
15 million or so, 15 or so million,
So that means,
19 million, excuse me,
how much?
19 million.
Well, that makes my next question a little bit more difficult. But if it's 19 million and you underspent by 25, then that means you underspent by 6 million.
Sure. Yep. And I think the reality is, right, if we'll recall, the $1 billion budget hole created by Congress and the intentional slowdown that was asked for by the city in terms of slowing down vacancies, being mindful of all of our expenditures to make sure that we were able to balance the city's budget. And so we did see a higher than usual vacancy savings. We also scrutinized our expenditures a little bit more because that was the direction that we were given to actually try and create some savings throughout the government.
So at the moment, so I think the, what are they called? The FMAP?
FRP.
FRPs, thank you. I think the FRPs just got posted, but I haven't seen it for DCPS.
So ours, I saw ours this morning, and it's moving through the process. We're predicting an underspend of $101,000, or $100,000 essentially is what we're predicting underspending, is what the OCFO is predicting across a $1.4 billion budget.
I was looking for a different answer.
Sorry, I couldn't help you there.
I'm out of time. Councilmember Henderson?
Okay, just want to ask really quickly. So and as part of the narrative in terms of what was submitted in the budget book, there was a piece around early action pre-K initiatives and DCPS quote being dedicated to expanding access to early childhood education programs across the city. Renovations and new classrooms will be needed to accommodate this expansion of the program. We've done that in a couple of places thus far already. I'm curious, where are you all looking in the next school year around expansion? Or are you?
For pre-K3, pre-K4?
Yeah.
I think we're still evaluating it. I think one of the challenges we see is that we just see less students
Okay.
in the system for pre-K3 and pre-K4. Currently, right now, enrollment applications for my school, DC, is down for pre-K. And so I think we need to continue to understand and analyze what is the landscape going to be for the future as we think about, you know, where classrooms are, how we support classrooms for pre-K3 and pre-K4,
Okay.
given what we know about declining birth rates.
Okay. And what about your partnerships with CBOs for our even younger learners? DCPS is a host site to a couple of early childhood programs, even in the 0 to 3 space. And this past school year, one of your partners had to close a number of sites due to loss of funding on the private side. Have you all been able to contract with new CBO partners so that that can restart in the next school year? Like, I would hate for us to lose these spaces because they're already outfitted for the 0 to 3, right? Like, we've already built it out for that purpose. And there clearly is still demand and need in the childcare space for slots. So how are you all approaching that?
Yes, so we are doing requests for proposals for supporting the child development centers. So
Okay.
to answer your question, we are seeking partnerships.
Is the RFP currently up on your site?
I'll check with our team. I believe so, but I
Okay.
will confirm. I think the other area that we would need to continue to is some of the similar right sizing that we've done with or thinking to do in pre-K3 and pre-K4, but it's important to note that UPO is also identifying other sources of funding. And so we believe that at least one of the classrooms that was taken offline this year will be brought back online next year.
Next year, 27, or next year, next school year?
Next school year.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I think we still will see robust offerings for our child development centers, but we may just not see the numbers that we've seen before.
Okay. Again, like I said, I know that for our child development centers, their biggest costs are space and people. And if DCPS is offering space, that helps a lot for families who are seeking slots.
Now, again, forecasting to the future, I think there could be a space where we continue to think about, you know, how does the government facilities fit into the whole childcare solutions and affordability in ways that we potentially haven't done in the past. So I think that's another option.
That's further. Let's talk about next school year in terms of like, let's try to make up the spaces that we just lost in this year. I want to ask a little bit about central office for a second. So the budget proposes a large decrease in school support services, But I know that a large chunk of that, about 49 million, is a move of certain monies to Department of General Services. So that would leave about a $17 million cut in central. Is that about accurate?
I don't have the exact number.
The budget book shows 66 million, which is a large chunk.
Yeah.
So that would make people feel like, oh my gosh, all of central office is about to get fired. But if you look, DGS is getting a bunch of that money.
Yeah. So the way I think about it, and I think obviously Dr. Ashley can add more context, is the percent of FTEs in central services, because it's something that we've been tracking over time. So last year we saw a 6% decrease in personnel. This year we're projecting an 8% decrease in personnel.
Okay.
So that's significant.
Yes, it is.
Along with other services that we're having to, take out of our central service budget. So as I shared in our testimony, I think the challenge has been.
Wait, I'm sorry. Can we unpack that for a minute? Because I
Sure.
had a question about tech and systems support, which our documents are showing gone. But I'm like, but you guys, you have systems and you have tech. So like that can't be what's happening there. So I'm curious, like, where else are you getting those supports and services? Or is that a typo?
You talking about tech?
Tech and systems support.
Yeah,
Okay.
oftentimes we don't see the same documents that you all see.
Okay.
And so we are not cutting tech and systems support.
I was like, oh, maybe they got some internal whiz kid.
We have lots of whiz kids, but we are not cutting that significantly.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it might be the attributes a little bit different.
What divisions are being hit the hardest?
Yeah, I think we see the most significant shifts in areas where there are shifts in needs. So for example, our special education population is shifting, our early childhood education population is shifting, as I mentioned earlier with pre-K. I think those are the two areas where I think we see the most significant shifts. There are other ways in which we support schools. For example, we typically pay for licenses for platforms and some of the tech supports that schools utilize. That will be shifting over in some cases to schools. And so I think, again, personnel in those areas that I mentioned, and also some of the supports that we provide centrally in costs that we cover that schools will not have to cover.
But when we sort of have this conversation, right, like shifting licenses and otherwise, when you shift licenses, which is now a new cost, there's two things. One, are we getting economies of scale now that every school is going to have to pay for it itself, right? There are pricing for some of these systems when it is happening from central office and you're doling out licenses to all of your various locations. If every school is doing it for themselves, then don't we lose that?
We do lose the economies of scale that can be beneficial, but at the same time, when schools are receiving more dollars at a much higher rate.
I know, but it's almost like a shell game when you say that though, right? Schools are getting more, but then because now I have to pay for software systems that I didn't have to pay for before, and now I got to cut field trips.
Potentially,
But yes, if you're paying more of the school budget, then like a number of years ago, we used to have this conversation a lot of like, let's give schools the maximum flexibility. But as you start to move things from central office to now the schools having to do it, the flexibility goes away. Does it not?
Could potentially, but I believe given the budgets that schools have, they have flexibility. I think they do a really good job of trying to be responsive to the specific needs of their school community. Sometimes they say, you know what, this isn't the priority that's right for us, and they choose to invest in other ways.
Other ways they ask for other sources. Chancellor, like I know you have a parent council. So you actually sat down and talked to some of these PSOs, and the request of fundraising that we are asking parents to do to fill in the gap of something that had been previously paid for that is not paid for further. And I think this brings into a question of the equity conversation, because there are some schools that are gonna figure it out. They're gonna figure out how to pay for your licensing now, and they're gonna figure out how to continue to pay for the special librarian, and then also to pay for field trips. And then there are some schools where the kids will never see any part of the city because field trips have to be cut.
Well, we're not cutting anything for field trips for school, and we ensure that there's equity and access for field trip. But I think what you're getting into, we just got tighter budgets, right? And so the choices that we have is, how do you allocate what you have strategically to schools and central services? And we prioritize the classroom teacher and ensuring that schools have the appropriate educators. Would it be great to have more resources to maintain all the supports we have centrally and continue to fund schools in the way we have, and also increase compensation as we've done with our collective bargaining agreements? But all those numbers don't square with the current fiscal environment that we're in.
I hear you on that. What I'm suggesting, though, is that our narrative and language about how we speak about it is just not presenting the full picture of what's actually going on. We tout and do press releases and ribbon cuttings and stuff about, oh my gosh, we've raised the UPSFF, but then you guys aren't really talking about, oh, most of that is already gone because of the teacher union contract, or oh, most of that's already gone because now software licenses now have to move to schools. So it makes our job harder as a legislator, or appropriator rather, is because now I have all of these parents and school community members who are coming to me and saying, like, it's not enough, but they're saying all of these things, right? I don't feel like we're doing a really good job in terms of expectation setting of one decision impacts the other decision, which impacts the other decision.
I think we are very transparent about the real numbers, and I would argue, and I've had the beauty and the honor of doing this now for 8 years. I've seen 8 fiscal years.
Mhm.
I've seen much louder and more argument about equity and resources in the past than I have seen and heard in the current state. And I think it's because we've continued to refine our budget process, one, to be more transparent. Secondly, to ensure that we fund schools at the level that's most appropriate with the resources we have in the most equitable way possible. Is it solving all of our challenges? No, but I believe what we do now is significantly better than where we were, even when we had more resources. But the idea that we're playing this shell game, I don't believe that. I think we're being very transparent with what the real numbers are in terms of how schools are allocated and what the real numbers are in terms of how central services is supported. But I would be the first one to acknowledge, when it comes to our young people, we'll never have enough resources, right? And we are confined to the current landscape of where we are fiscally. But again, I think even the chairman acknowledged in his opening remarks, what we hear from schools about their budgets is not what we heard in the past.
I also said it was because of schools first. So, Dr. Ashley, you said something about different budget documents. So, and I'm not looking for criticism, I'm looking to understand. And it doesn't surprise me, but explain.
Say the last part, what you just
Just
said.
that it doesn't surprise me, but explain.
So, we submit budget documents. They go into the big budget process. Council often sees different spreadsheets than what we see in terms of what we've submitted in our own internal budgeting applications as well. So sometimes we do see things that are organized in different manners. And we also see sometimes that there are changes that have been made. Most times just by mistake, we've seen some double counting and things like that. And so we're always happy to help explain. So for example, one of our cost centers actually shows a doubling of positions. And that was actually a shift from cost centers, and then it got doubled. And so sometimes, there are these, you guys are looking at one document and we're looking at something different. So we're always happy to help, sit down and collaboratively talk through what that looks like.
Well, shouldn't we know where there are those discrepancies? Because in the end, we adopt the budget, and the budget we adopt is what we give to the CFO to load into the system. So I don't know if there's a doubling in the cost center of FTEs, but if there is a doubling and that's not what was intended, we need to know that to correct that.
Yeah, and we're just now going through, we have some of the same documents now and we're going through those. And so typically we do work with Bajan and the team of like flagging those things where we know there are issues, as well as the mayor's errata document. And so we'll make sure as we go through those documents, we are communicating those with you.
All right, so you will share that.
It's in our best interest to be collaborative in that way, yes.
Yes.
Unless it benefits us, and then we won't share.
Yes.
No.
I appreciate your chuckling at that, but I kind of know how it works. The what was shifted from either central school-wide school support to schools? So the line of questioning dealt with software licenses. What else was shifted?
I think I wouldn't say that was probably the most significant. I would say the other area is stipends for TLIs, which are teacher leadership / coaching positions that schools can establish. In the past, we've supported that with stipends centrally. If schools elect to have a TLI, they will need to support that from their own budget.
What's a TLI, teacher leadership?
Yeah, so
What's the I in TLI?
what is the I in TLI? I'm not really sure. I think we've got.
Initiative.
Okay, teacher leadership initiative. So it is a structure where a teacher could have a portion of their day with students as a direct classroom teacher, and then they have a portion of their day where they're coaching other teachers within the building. If schools elected to do that, we have paid the stipend. We're now saying, schools, if you elect to do that, you will have to be responsible for the stipend.
How much are we talking about? So on the TLI, what would that be for a school that elects to do that?
We'd have to get your number. I'm not sure what the cost is on.
$2,500
Per,
per TLI.
and so not every school does that.
That is correct.
And of schools that do it, what's the typical number?
In terms of how many TLIs
Yeah.
they have, or how many TLIs total?
I'm sorry, isn't that the same? So what I'm looking for is, if a school elects to do it, is it likely to be 1 or 3 TLIs?
I think it varies by school.
And how much do the software licenses cost?
So I think the important thing to talk about software licenses, one, is that we provide all required licenses that are required as part of curricular activities. And so if there are additional, things that are provided, those are up to the discretion of the school. And there's been some things that we have discontinued centrally. And I'm not sure if Dr. Bay has any of those off the top of her head, but that schools have still said, we still see value in this and that our school community really likes them. And so they've continued to invest in those. And so it really depends on from a school to school basis. Likewise, there's some software licenses that we've never paid for centrally, and that the schools say, we really find this a valuable tool. It meets our security requirements. It goes through a vetting process, and then they're allowed to use that as well. And so it's really hard for us to say what those licenses cost would be. But Dr. Bay, I don't know if you, off the top of your head, if you have any of the examples.
I don't have any off the top of my head. I want to make sure that what we share is accurate, but we can provide you with that information.
Okay, so the software licenses that are required are still being paid for by central or school support or school-wide?
Correct.
It's only these optional licenses.
That is correct.
Let me shift to asking about contracts. How much are you paying for the food contracts this year?
Yeah. Let me.
I'm going to next ask, how much are you projected to pay next year? Although I think I have that answer.
Yeah, let me find out on the school contract, on the food contracts. I think the important thing with as we get the numbers for you on that is like the food contracts are challenging because we never know how many meals we're going to serve. And one of the things that we're actually really proud of is that we're going to actually serve more than 10 million meals this year, which is more meals than we've ever served, right? And so we see demand growing. And so we start with a budget amount, and we see that there's more demand. Kids are more excited about the offerings. We're being more creative. And then so you'll see some modifications as well. You've probably seen one that's in front of the council right now, where we do add additional funding for those contracts. And so some of that is local dollars, and then some of that is USDA match that comes from Aussie. We have $46.7 million in FY26 is what we have budgeted, and that goes to $48.6 million in FY27. So a small increase there. We also know as part of our option year contracts that those costs will increase year over year as well.
From 46.7 to 48.5.
46.7 to 48.6.
Yeah, I have 5 here, but let's say 6. So that's 1.9. And technology is going from 18.4 to 20.2. Does that sound right?
It sounds right.
And security is going from 30 to 39.
Correct. Do you want me to answer before you ask?
Yes.
So this is our final year of our option contract. And so we are in the process right now of rebidding security. And so we do not know what that will look like in the next fiscal year. We also know from some of the market research that we've done and some of the costs that we've seen is that we do expect those prices to be higher. And so what we want to make sure that we can do is to be able to cover all of the services that we are providing today with this new contract because it hasn't been bid and we haven't awarded a contract yet. This is our best guess at what we think that this might cost so that we can continue to provide services.
Well, tell me why I'm wrong. I am of a view that there can never be enough. That folks are always saying, well, there are 3 security officers here, but really I'd like 5. And that's the pressure. And I'm of a view that there isn't enough analysis and pushback that, well, actually, maybe you don't need 5. Maybe you don't need 3. Maybe you need 2. I'm not saying there shouldn't be security, but I think what do I want to say? The human inclination is more. And this contract is something that we, the council, has pushed back on in recent years. This is roughly a 30% increase.
Correct.
That's huge.
And
And that's above what it was. So I think a couple of years ago, it was like 24 million.
correct.
And I was complaining it was too high.
I do want to point out, and we agree, right? And we do try to find that balance. We want to make sure our schools are secure. We also know that our principals and our parents find a lot of value in the security officers being there.
Isn't that what I just said?
Yes, and I'm saying they find value in the folks that are there. I do think.
Well, I would just add that I don't think it's just finding values. Like we've had real incidents in schools that.
I'm not disagreeing with
Yeah,
that.
so I think
But
when we need to cover,
I walk
you have to
into
be
this building or
responsive.
walk out of this building and there's 1 officer sitting at the desk. And then I walk into or out of the building and there are 4 sitting at the desk. Well, which is it, 1 or 4? And as far as I know, there was not a call or alarm or anything. So I don't dispute that there are incidents.
Yeah.
And I don't dispute that even if there are no incidents, that there need to be some security officials. I don't think there's been any real analysis of the need per school or whether it would be cheaper to do it in-house. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but my recollection a couple of years ago, we were paying the contractor something like $50 or $60 per officer. That's not what they're making. That's 50 or 60 per hour. That's not what they're making at all. If we doubled what they were making, we would still be saving on the cost of security. Of course, we then would have additional costs. I don't think that analysis has ever been done. So we're just paying more. Dr. Ashley, you got interrupted.
Yeah, no, it's, I appreciate the conversation. I think there's a couple things that are often forgotten with security as well, is that this is not just the school day. This is all our athletics events. These are our after-school activities. These are the PTA meetings that are happening as well. And so, like, we are having a lot of additional engagements, right? And we want to provide productive ways for our kids to be engaged, and we want to always provide security for those opportunities. I think the other piece of this is reminding that it's a labor hour contract, right? And so when you do see that $50 an hour, you're correct. Not all of that is going to the individual employee, but the reality is, like, we don't have to create an additional sub pool. And so if the security officer calls out, we don't pay for that, and they have an
No, I
additional
understand.
pool. And so, like, there are economies of scale here of using contractors.
You also don't have to train them.
We also don't have to train them. You're right. Thank you for making the case for me. I think the reality is, right, we continue.
The insurance.
Yeah, the insurance. And so we are trying to find that balance. Many of our schools only have one security officer, and we differentiate by grade level. We also want to make sure that we are able to get kids in and out of the school building at the beginning of the day, because that increases attendance, right? If there's a long line for
Oh, sure.
security. So, like, we do try to find that balance. All of that to say is, like, we do think this is valuable. We continue to find ways that we can have efficiencies here.
So thankfully for you, I'm over my time. We've been joined by Councilmember Wendell Felder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was enjoying the dialogue. Chancellor, it's always delightful to see you and members of your senior leadership team.
Thank you, Councilmember Felder.
Absolutely. You're experiencing this. All agencies across the district are experiencing this. You guys are seeing reductions in your overall agency budget. I'll start off with some general questions and then I'll dive right in. My first question, despite your reduction in funding for your operating budget, what are you most proud of your DCPS proposed budget for FY 2027?
Yeah, thank you. So I shared in our testimony, we're extremely proud that we continue to see more students graduate on time, prepared for college and career than we've ever seen before. I also shared a testimony.
second.
Oh,
Can you let him finish this and we go to her?
Yeah, that's fine.
so yes, you asked what we are proud of, and so again, I shared in my opening testimony that we're extremely proud of the growing number of students that are graduating on time, prepared for college and career. I'm personally really thrilled that we have more students earning dual enrollment credit, right? So they're earning college credit in high school, something that is a budget enhancement for us to expand those opportunities for our high school students. We see record gains in both math and literacy from what we were able to achieve pre-pandemic and post-pandemic subgroups exceeding that performance level. We're still one of the fastest improving urban school district in the nation, and we're number one. If you look at all states and jurisdictions from post-pandemic 22 to 2024, DC is number one. And I think that says a lot about the work of our educators, what our students have been able to achieve. So I point to that what I'm most proud of. I think this budget sustains that work well. The work that we've done in math, the professional development that we provide for our educators, the compensation that is very competitive for our staff. And so I think this budget allows us to continue that progress. And, that's what I'm excited about. Also excited when we think about our young people and keeping them engaged. Outside of school time, we've added additional resources to support after school programming, which I think is a true anchor, not just for the school, but also how we ensure that our young people thrive and have meaningful experiences outside of the school day.
Thank you for that. And with a 1.4 modest reduction in your operating funds, what's some of the biggest challenges that you see presented within your proposed budget, if any?
Well, I showed in my testimony, we're really thrilled that we're able to continue to expand our modernization and small cap program. And so that's a big accomplishment for DCPS. I think we've got one of our largest number of modernizations that we're going to be opening in August, additions. And so I think our challenge would be, as we expand more space, how do we ensure that we have, the appropriate preventative maintenance? How do we ensure that we're able to address some of the buildings that have not been modernized? And so I think from an operational standpoint, that's a challenge. And then we continue to see our operating costs increase with the market, just like everyone else. But I think our central services team, I shared earlier, is going to be reduced by 8%. And we saw 6% last year. And I think our challenge will be is how do we respond to the needs of our schools when we continue to see a shrinking central services team that provides those supports to students and families and our educators.
Now, with the with the decrease in your operating funds, but an increase of 4.6% in your capital funds, how are you ensuring that investments in facilities are matched with sufficient operating resources?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier, really confident in the small caps budget, our capital improvements. There's a lot that we are doing with life and safety. For example, we're addressing our door locks. We're ensuring that there's better and more up-to-date weapons abatement equipment, which is an issue that comes up from time to time. And so I think, again, staying ahead of the maintenance costs, continue to monitor utility expenses as well. I know some of that's being shifted to DGS, but those expenses we know that continue to rise.
Now, Chancellor, I saw that your personnel services increased by $50 million, while your non-personnel services decreased significantly. Could you explain what was the shift in spending priorities?
Yes, I think personnel typically increase with just the cost of benefits, salary increases. And so I would say that probably is the main driver there. We aren't adding FTEs centrally, as I mentioned earlier. We're actually realizing a reduction. And so it would be on the school side. If you look at the net teachers, I believe we're up maybe like 60 teachers or so. And we're also in a year where there's a WTU salary increase. And so that coupled with the increased costs of benefits and other employee costs, that's the main driver.
Now, are schools experiencing reductions in supplies or programming as a result of this shift?
No. Yeah, we analyze that utilization year over year to ensure that they have the appropriate money for supplies and materials.
Now, I see that DCPS FTEs decreased by about 60%, 60 positions. I think you were kind of alluding to that recently, while personnel spending increased. What explains this dynamic absent of the teachers union contract? Is there any additional cost to that?
I can't think of it. I mean, schools continue to make decisions where they add certain positions to their budgets year over year, and then they make adjustments based on their student populations and needs. And so I think that's where we see the greatest fluctuation. Of course, each year, salaries do increase with not only collective bargaining agreement, but the step increases that teachers are entitled to as well.
Okay.
But those are our main drivers for personnel costs.
Copy. Could you speaking of personnel and staffing, could you speak to the staffing policy on nurses and medical staff? Are there medical professionals located at every school? That's come up a lot.
They are. So we currently collaborate with the Department of Health. Department of Health used to have a contract with Children's for health professionals for schools. Now those individuals are employees of the district, and they manage that portfolio of personnel that support schools both in DCPS and the public charter school sector.
Thank you. Well, you know where I'm going with my next line of questions. This won't be a good hearing if I didn't bring up Ward 7. Schools. So, Chancellor, as you are aware, Ward 7 schools often face disproportionate facility needs and student support challenges, making equitable investments critical for our students. who attend school in Ward 7. So my question, Chancellor, is how does DCPS ensure equitable distribution of both operating and capital funds to Ward 7 schools?
Yeah, so we do assessment each year of all our schools across all 8 wards to identify priority capital projects. As you know, the PACE Act determines how we modernize facilities. We've been able to hold true to that. But in terms of other capital improvements, we do assessments of our buildings to ensure that we are prioritizing need. We look at the history of particular issues. We look at safety aspects as well to determine what's the most equitable way to identify projects for improvement. And I believe, again, we've done a really good job with addressing schools across all 8 wards, but also you can see many of your schools in Ward 7 have benefited from our capital projects.
And then my final question, what metrics are you used to define equity and funding?
So we want to ensure that our resources are aligned to need. And so we look at need from a facility standpoint, as I mentioned earlier, but also for students. And that's how we allocate resources, both for our schools and also the way we think about capital improvements.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Henderson, I apologize for skipping you.
It's okay, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of more questions for me. I actually going to pick up where Councilmember Felder left off in terms of talking a little bit about capital projects. Did you guys send to the committee of the whole your small cap list plan for FY27?
Don't know if we've sent that.
Okay. If you do share it with the committee of the whole, and I do think they probably would be interested, if you could share it with my office as well.
Sure.
It just helps to provide a little bit more context in terms of individual school communities. I did notice that the budget proposes an additional 1.7 million in FY27 to retrofit up to 10 school kitchens. Now, the hope in me is like, ooh, does this mean that they're going to start doing more or expand their scratch cooking sites? But then I'm also trying to be realistic, and I'm just like, maybe that's y'all just retrofit in the warm up zones. But I wanted to ask.
Yeah, it's not to take over operations, is ensure that we have the equipment to support schools in the current structure we have, but it's something that we continue to think about, ways in which we could potentially expand, but it's not directly related to that right now.
Okay. Do you already know which 10 schools?
Not sure the specific document you're looking at, but the kitchen upgrades that you're referring to is Oyster Adams, is an upgrade.
Wait, time out. Why are we doing a upgrade to a school that just got renovated?
Sorry, Adams.
Okay.
Not the one I just, yes, thank you.
It's like, wait a minute.
Yes.
I think you're saying Oyster. Oyster's the old one, Adams is brand new.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you put it together. I was like, hold on.
Thank you for that. And then we are doing some smaller work at Payne, Lafayette, River Terrace, Roosevelt, and Woodson. And these are really stabilization projects, making sure that we can continue to meet DC health regulations as equipment is breaking. Some things that folks don't realize is that like our ovens can cost up to $40,000. And so some of this is just replacing aging equipment until that school gets to a modernization.
Gets to a modernization? You named River Terrace, which brand new. Well, ish. Okay, fine. 10 years. Been 10 years? I guess it has been. It has been a little bit more than 10 since we've done River Terrace. Okay. Roosevelt.
It's been more than 10.
Yeah, it's been okay. All right. Okay. I think of some of these projects as like still in pretty good condition.
Yeah.
But I understand sort of the upgrades, upkeep pieces.
Yeah, and Councilmember Henderson, if I can, I think the other thing that we are working on is making sure that we're doing better life cycle management, and then making a capital improvement plan for all of this equipment. Traditionally, a lot of this has been borne out of operating costs, right? And at an oven that is $40,000, right? That is a capital eligible expense. And so how is it that we're thinking about this in a better, more long-term strategy? We know that we're building buildings for the long term, but some of the equipment inside of it is not going to last as long, so.
We've been having this ongoing conversation with the CFO's office about what is capital eligible. So I'm just sort of noting that an oven is capital eligible, but some of them believe that a trash can is not. So interesting. Okay. All right. So roof repairs, I think is another area where we have seen a lot of things. How are we approaching this and sort of comparing it around schools that we know have an upcoming modernization?
Yeah.
But like the water is still seeping through, you know?
Yeah, it's a great point. You know, we do life cycle assessments on all of our roofs and understand, how quickly they need to be replaced to make sure that they can be in good working order. And that roof assessment does show prioritization. We do try not to replace a roof that we're just going to tear down in a couple of years, right?
Okay.
Like it is about how do we actually find that balance? And when can we do patching versus an entire roof? In the FY27, you're seeing a roof for Sousa for $4.2 million, for example.
This is great news for the Sousa community, although I'm sure they would like a full modernization, but we're going to get there, right? We're working on our historic designation, and we'll see that in the upcoming PACE documents that these schools be included. Yes? Wonderful. When will we get the PACE supplemental information?
Yeah, the PACE supplement is in its final stages of being transmitted to the council.
What does that mean? The committee of the whole is voting on this joint in like 3 weeks.
Is it stuck in IQ?
It is an IQ, yes.
That could be a couple months, half a year.
Be nice to have it before we vote.
And Councilmember Henderson, I will point out in the education modernization report that is being proposed to be included as part of the budget moving forward.
Yes.
You're going to press the executive to get it out of IQ?
We will follow up, yes.
Okay. We've received some outreach from community members and families at Dunbar High School about some consistent issues that they've had with elevators, as well as garage doors. I noticed that they don't have a particular line item. It's not a large project. Elevators is a small cap, but I don't have a small cap list to know whether or not they'll be able to get that addressed.
Yeah, elevators is a challenge across the district because the many different vendors that were involved when the elevators were constructed, but we have recently, I think, elevated the pace in which we're able to respond to elevator repairs. And so the goal is to continue to collaborate with DGS on people who can make the repairs quickly.
Okay.
But sometimes who repairs the elevator is driven by who constructed the elevator, right? And the contract on that. So I think we got a better understanding of that, and we've been better with repairs of elevators. But my understanding, this is also kind of a citywide issue that elevator repairs are slow across the district.
Okay.
I'm not really sure. I'm Dr. Ashton.
I'm just going to ask, are you aware of the concerns at Dunbar?
Dunbar and several other schools with elevators.
Okay.
Do you want the update on Dunbar?
Yes, please.
So Dunbar, the elevator, we now know what the part is that's broken. It's what supplies power to a specific component. They're working on sourcing and funding that part, and so they're working through that. And so now that we've identified it, there will be quicker resolution on that. We also know that a garage door does work, but there's something wrong with the control board, and so they're able to manually open it with a push button, but the fobs don't necessarily communicate with the control. And so we're working on figuring out exactly what part is needed for that, but that work is in progress as well.
Okay. I don't want to minimize the garage door, but the elevator piece clearly is an ADA compliance issue, which we've had at other schools where Now students have to take their classes on the first floor via computer screen because they can't get to their class on the second or third level. So like definitely sort of
It is a high priority for
high
us.
priority. Great. Connected schools. There were several concerns raised about the proposed cuts to connected schools. Now, Chancellor, I've heard you lift up connected schools in instead of community schools, right? The DCPS connected schools is our response to community schools, but now we're cutting it. You know, do we have, like, what other capacity or infrastructure are we providing schools to fill in the gaps here?
Yeah, so we still believe it is a very strong model and schools continue to thrive utilizing it. I think what we're seeing is just schools that have implemented for a while have decided that we're going to invest in other resources in different ways. So it's not a divestment or deprioritizing this strategy. We've had a couple of schools that have decided that, yeah, we're going to take some elements of the model, but we may not just be a connected school by name, but we may incorporate some other strategies that we think are important to our student population. So we'll have 12 connected schools next year, but we have 18 currently, and most of those changes are shifts that have been made by school leadership in terms of prioritizing in other ways. We do have some schools that were provided federal grants as a part of commitment to connected schools as well. But centrally, what we've always provided to schools that are connected schools will not change. That will be consistent.
Okay. If we could just get that small capital project list, and of course, the PACE documents would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. And again, sorry, I skipped you. Councilmember Fruman.
Thank you, Chairman Mendelson. On the connected schools, have you tracked data on what sort of an impact the connected school model has had on truancy? Do you have any indication that it's been helpful in reducing truancy or not?
And I think it's really difficult to identify one strategy as the primary driver. We do see some indication that students who may not be attending school because of other barriers in the home or community, the connected schools models can help remove some of those barriers. But I think tying it one-to-one, this strategy is the primary, I think it's difficult for us to do.
Well, the reason I ask is DHS has a pilot on truancy, and I'll be asking questions about that coming up. And the impact of that pilot doesn't look that strong to me. I'm going to ask the director to explain why it should look stronger to me than it looks on paper. But if there are other things that are having a bigger impact on truancy, then maybe we need to think about taking resources that are used in a place where it's not having a giant impact and putting it in a place where it is. Do you have an idea of a place like that?
Yeah, I think we continue to try a wide range of strategies. If you look at just raw attendance, you do see about a 7% higher attendance rate for those schools that are connected schools. And so I think you can draw some conclusions that there's an impact, right? But you also see a correlation with high impact tutoring as well. So those students that receive high impact tutoring generally have a higher attendance rates as well. So I think there are a number of different factors where we see very promising strategies, but we also want to continue to try new ones. I think with the pilot, what we see is the value of case management in the most intensive way, with really digging in with the family of what are the barriers that are keeping students from coming to school, and case managing up to solutions that can best support that family.
All right, well, this is an area, and I sort of gave a heads up at the public testimony hearing to the director that I'm going to be asking about it. The numbers of students for whom attendance improved is just not that big. And so
That's fair.
You got to take a look at that. The budget for security goes up 9 million, up to 39 million. What happened, and why is that? Why did that budget number go up?
Yeah, thank you, Councilman Foon. We talked about that earlier. I mean, there's increased costs for personnel, and we see that across the board, not unique. And I think we're also providing more services. We mentioned earlier, for example, we are expanding the extracurricular and after-school opportunities for students and families. There's security that goes along with that, which increases the cost. And so I think those are a few drivers. I don't know, Dr. Ashley, is there anything else you want to add in terms of like?
Actually, if you add, you know that one of the things that I will be interested in is how much of that increase or how much of the investment is for after school time, for after 5 p.m., for example. So as you embellish, keep that question in mind too.
Yeah, and I'm happy to get that for you. I don't know if I have it off the top of my head. Our costs at schools are actually relatively predictable, right? We know that we have 3 security guards here, 1 security guard here. We know that that's tour of duty. And so those costs are actually really predictable for us. We do surge in support as needed if we're having something going on at a school and they need more folks in there. I think the other point, just to add to the chancellor, that's important in this context too, is that we are rebidding that contract. And so typically we have an option year that we can look forward and see what pricing will be in the next year. We do not have that in this case. And so we're in the process of actively bidding that. And so there is a bit of uncertainty in the contract. We can follow up with you on what is the cost that is just for schools and then what is for all of the other activities after the hearing.
Yeah, and I mean, is the idea that the contract would build in the standard stuff and then a kind of an accordion of time for outside of school time and so that's subsumed in the contract because, as you know, for after school things, weekend things, there's a charge for security, but that's already included in what you're paying under. Is that already included in what you're paying under?
Yeah, the way the contract is structured is it's a strict labor hour contract, which means that somebody works an hour, we pay an hourly rate. And so like we don't set out and say, you're going to provide security for all of these schools, right? And it's a fixed cost. We do make allocation decisions based on that and say this school needs 1, this school needs 2. And like I said, sometimes that changes based on the circumstances on the ground throughout the year. And so it doesn't contemplate in that way. It says, here's the hour. So the hour that costs for, providing school services is the same hour that it costs for an after-school activity.
And you may say to the contractor, we need this week, and next week you might need, we need 2 people over here at Roosevelt because there's going to be people there at night.
Correct. Yeah, a perfect example of that is like we see a lot more utilization during fall sports. As well, where we have additional security folks that are staffing those games. Basketball season as well. We see different ebbs and flows of utilization throughout the year. We do utilize the same personnel. Generally, they're assigned to our contract with some exceptions. Right, there's a sub pool that they manage. And then the other piece of this that's important, as well as we talk about controlling cost, is we don't pay overtime. Right. And so if their employees go over 40 hours, that's built in as part of their contract within that $50 or so an hour.
All right. Wonderful. Under what kinds of circumstances do you go with a sole source contract? And I think one of those circumstances is iReady. And why was iReady a sole source contract?
Yeah, I mean, we pretty closely, not pretty close, so we do follow the PPRA, which outlines when and where we can award sole source. Some of the technology purchases and assessment packages and curriculum fall under sole source assessments. I think it's important to recognize is even when we do a sole source procurement, we go out and do market research, and the program teams are looking at different offerings out there. But we don't do the same sort of competitive bidding that we would and say, pitch us, this testing assessment platform or this curriculum. But we do go out and evaluate the marketplace.
And I think one of the things to be clear on the final point from an academic standpoint, we really need to have assessments that are aligned to our standards and our summative assessments. And so that really drives the way we think about which assessments that we utilize, because we want to ensure that it provides us with the information we need to inform instruction, to inform interventions. And obviously the assessments are created differently. And so we want to make sure that we have the right tools for our school leaders and our educators.
So I'm I'm increasingly hearing from folks, and I don't want to make it sound like it's a million people, but I'm hearing from folks who have concerns about screens in schools and reliance on screens in schools. And there's, people invoke to me data about kids learn both math and reading better from hands-on instruction, person to person, than when they learn it on a screen. To what extent are you hearing that? To
We
what
also hear
extent,
that,
and to what extent do you evaluate the efficacy of these technology tools? They're sort of new, but to what extent are you reviewing it? And I'm sorry to have cut you off, but go ahead.
No, thank you. I think it's a great question. There's growing research about screen time. I am of the mindset that, too much of anything could be bad for you, right? And I think we need to find ways to find balance. It was the topic that I brought to the Washington Teachers Union in our meeting this week to really discuss the teacher perspective on this and how educators are thinking about it. I think what I got from that conversation is also the importance to balance. I think there are benefits to some of the technology tools that we have in terms of it being computer adaptive, providing space for the teachers to have multiple instructional groups in the classroom. And so I think we will need to continue to dive into the research, but also think about what policies or practices do we need to stand up to ensure that we do have that balance as we learn more. I think we've seen really positive outcomes from the cell phone ban. And so what we're seeing now from a school day perspective is we really drive access to devices and screen time, right? Because these are the devices that we're allocating to school. Now, what I think is a budgetary consideration, since we're at a budget hearing, is do we need to continue to invest in technology in the same way in the past in terms of devices? Because that's a huge part of our budget. We do see some school districts that are moving away from one-to-one. They're changing the way that they think about investments in technology. We need to continue to do our homework on that because it's something that I worry about because that we have huge tech advocates who want us to buy more, but I think there is some merit to the research that is emerging that maybe that's not the best way to allocate your resources in terms of improving student outcomes and student achievement. But finally, I am of the mindset also that there is no substitute for direct instruction. And that is, the way that students most benefit from this teacher to student interaction.
So really helpful. I've been hearing more and more about this, and I've mentioned it to the chairman the other day that right now we're in the middle of the budget season. Nobody's got the bandwidth to think about this, but I do think in the fall, stepping back and gathering information on this and having a conversation. These are technologies that have been introduced, and they were introduced in part through COVID, and now they're on the landscape. But stepping back and taking an assessment of how do they fit, what makes sense, which way should we go, I think would be a valuable thing. Do you share that view that if we
I
had
agree.
that?
I started the conversation. I could see it taking a similar path that we took. Again, I mentioned earlier the cell phone ban. I think there are some policies that can come from further conversation, focus groups. We want to obviously also hear from our parents and students. It's interesting, preliminary conversation with students. They also see the value of direct instruction and is their preferred way to experience the classroom. So we'll continue to solicit feedback, but yeah, I think it's a conversation that we need to have.
All right, wonderful. I've gone over, so I will stop now.
Thank you. There'll be another round. I do want to just comment, speaking about cell phones, that I got some feedback recently, a principal or a teacher who said there's much less fighting in the school because of the cell phone ban.
Yeah, I mean, I think our data around, altercations and conflict are being impacted by not just that, but we also, I believe, do a really good job with conflict resolution and mediation now in our schools. But I would say for certain that there's more positive interactions between students and their peers as a result.
Sure, but I just wanted to add the element of the perspective of the fighting, that there isn't the texting and social media during the school day that then fuels a fight after the day.
I would
or-
agree. That is certainly a benefit and it minimized that opportunity. I appreciate you calling that out.
So let me go back to, I want to go back to the security contract. It's being rebid. What's your schedule for it coming to the council? Ooh, there isn't a schedule.
There is, because it's coming up for expiration. I just don't have it.
So when does it
That's-
expire?
Give me 1 second. It expires September 30th.
And we
Oh.
probably want it in place for the start of the school year, which is August something.
I mean, I think we don't want to predetermine, like the contract ends, and so we have to honor till the end of the contract. And so we've got to think about the phase out plan as part of that, just like when we phased out other vendors. And so we'll work through that. They're also covered under the same protections of the Food Service Management
Displaced Workers
the Displaced
Act.
Workers Act. So like, we're not going to see big shifts of folks. Right now, we're really making sure that we're thinking through the requirements and making sure that we have really locked those down as we go out for solicitation.
So when is it, is the RFP, it's an RFP?
It is an RFP.
Has the RFP hit the streets?
Yes, it has.
And so when, I could ask for each step, I won't. When do you expect that there will be a selection?
The team is saying that we're expecting this to be to council in June. And that's very early for September contract, but obviously we know that you guys go on recess, and so I think they're going through the evaluation process right now. I don't want to get too in the weeds here on a contract that we're actively soliciting, so we can follow up with all the specific dates of when we think that we'll make a proposed award.
But you think it will be coming to the council in June?
In June, yes.
If I put money on it, you can make me lose. But I'm tempted
Notice I
to put
did-
money on it.
Did not give you a date in June, but we're working very hard to make sure that we're getting contracts in place with plenty of time, making sure that we're thinking about transition and also making sure that we give the council the opportunity to review those. And so hopefully you've noticed that in some of the contracts that have been coming over
Yeah.
already. So.
Which is good. When Councilmember Fruman was asking you some questions about security contract, you said you could get back with regard to what portion is after school or weekends.
Yep.
So if you do, be sure to give us a copy.
Absolutely.
That's the protocol. So I want to ask you about food. So the cost of the food services for DCPS in FY26 is 46.7 million. I think that's what you said earlier.
Believe so.
And the council received a food services contract with Sodexo on April 24th, modifying option year 2 because of, quote, increased enrollment, unquote. Isn't DCPS enrollment essentially flat? So then why is the contract increasing?
Yeah, I think it's the meal counts that we're referring to. More folks are taking part in our meals. It's something, again, as I mentioned, we're proud of that. The teams, all of our contractors and our self-operating program have really been creative in thinking about how that we get folks to partake. And that means that, we are having increased costs there. And so that's what you're seeing there as part of that.
So increased enrollment is not student enrollment in schools, but rather
Participation in the
Yeah.
meals program.
is the food really better?
I think so.
So Chancellor, when's the last time you ate a meal in the cafeteria?
It's been a while in the cafeteria, but we have the food service team do our meals for evening events, such as our student advisory board, parent advisory board. And so that's the last time I believe I've had a meal from one of our providers.
I will say I had some pizza at Czech the other day. Yeah, it was a veggie pizza. It was quite good. And I would eat it again for lunch. So we do see also that some of our teachers take part in the meal program, which I think is also indicative of the fact that they enjoy the food. It's convenient. You know, we have it's not just, you know, scooping things on a plate anymore. Like we have you know, sandwich bars, we have salad bars, we have different options. Taco bars.
I've had.
And so like it is about how do you drive participation and making sure that it's not just boring food. And we take feedback from the students across all of our providers and what we're offering, and have seasonal offerings as well.
This is not a question. I, the other day, ran into somebody, a senior person with one of the vendors, or 3 vendors, if I remember, for DCPS food.
They're self-operated, so 4 total.
4.
Yeah.
And this person commented that our having multiple vendors was actually a good thing.
I would agree. You know, they all
Well,
have
of
a
course,
healthy
we think
competition.
it's good,
Yeah.
but one of the vendors thought it was good.
Mhm. Yeah. It holds them all accountable.
Wasn't what?
It holds them all accountable, right?
Yeah.
And they're all looking for those meal counts, right? And how can they all out innovate? You know, I'm you know, partial to our self-operated program, but you know, we're always thinking about how that we continue to do different things in schools.
So the council sent over some what we call common budget questions, and in your common budget question responses, you identified a sole source ELA contract, $5,281,572. I have no idea why it says 64 cents without a vendor being specified. What's this for?
That is the high quality instructional material ELA curriculum that we have not yet awarded, which is why that there's not a vendor associated with that. And as a reminder, that's a OSSI requirement for us to update our literacy curriculum.
But wasn't DCPS producing ELA curriculum in-house?
We do, but we also have vendor provided ELA curriculum as well.
Well, yeah, why don't we do it in-house instead of paying a contractor?
So as a part of RC's work with identifying high quality instructional materials and materials that are in alignment with the science of reading, there have been recommendations made for curriculum that would best serve us in that area. And we believe that our current in-house curriculum is not as aligned as some of those other resources. And so we have been piloting other tools. For example, we talked a couple times about the middle school curriculum, and then we have some elementary schools also piloting curriculum. And I believe, Dr. Bay, correct me if I'm wrong, in middle school is Common Lit.
So you do something in-house and you don't think it's very good?
Well, we believe that there's some better options out there, given what we know about the strength of high quality instructional materials.
And you don't have folks in-house who are better than,
Well, I don't think it's in terms of are the people better. We just don't have the bandwidth that we had in the past. And so we don't have the same number of curriculum staff and the same central services team to produce a new curriculum at this time.
so do you know who the vendor is?
For that specific dollar amount, I don't know the vendor, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, that's also a multi-year. So OCFO provides this data, not the system. But we have not yet awarded a contract for the vendor, and so I think we're still evaluating specifically on some of our HQIM vendors, and don't want to get ahead of that contracting process.
So how did you pick the number $5,281,572.64?
So that is that's data that's supplied by the OCFO. So we have $846,000 allocated for that for FY27.
You have what?
$846,000 of that allocated in FY27. I think you're looking at a longer investment horizon, perhaps. What was the second part of your question? I'm sorry.
It was only one
Oh,
part,
oh.
and that was, how did you come up with $5,281,572.64?
Yeah, and so I think it just zooming out from just this specific procurement, not to oversimplify, right? The PPRA and any good procurement requires us to do market research when we're doing budgeting to understand, how much do we think the rough order of magnitude is for this procurement is going to be. Similar to what we did with the security contract, we go out, we look at what other folks are paying, and that's how we do the budgeting, because we ultimately will solicit, a contractor, and then we will negotiate with them and ultimately decide what that pricing
Sure,
is.
and that's what should happen.
Yes.
And ideally, you're representing the best interests of the city and saying to the vendor, no, we're not going to spend $10 billion
Right.
on this. We're going to come up with a more reasonable price. And
Yes.
you said you're doing some market research.
Yes.
But I think you said for $846,000 is what you think it will be in FY27.
That's what is budgeted. That's what is budgeted, yes.
You were speculating that the $5,281,572.64 is a multi-year total,
I don't have the same data that's in front of you, so happy to compare notes. But
except it came from your answers to the common budget questions.
I understand OCFO produces that, not the agency.
In close collaboration with the agency?
I do not have the data that you are referencing in front of me.
Can you provide the budget attributes for this?
Sure. Yep.
So the 64 cents might be an error.
I believe so. Could be.
I think Councilmember Fruman asked some questions about iReady. I want to go there for a moment. And I think I'll start this way. I visited a school, and before I left, I had to talk to 4 or 5 students. I'm not going to say the name of the student, but I'm looking at her statement. My name is blank. I am the representative from the 5th grade Spanish learning class. I love Cleveland, and I am an advanced ELA and math student. I want to let you know how many required DCPS tests we are assigned this year. 9 iReady diagnostics, 20 iReady growth checks, 40 math topic quizzes, 6 math module assessments, 8 RCTs, and 10 DC CAPE tests. This is a total of 93 tests. That means we are testing more than half of the days of school. I hope you can help all students with this. So Chancellor, you know that I have pressed that there's too much testing because I hear that complaint all the time. In our hearing last week and on other occasions, the committees received testimony arguing that iReady wasn't or isn't well aligned to CAPE in math, but is often used for measuring teacher effectiveness on impact.
Yeah, I heard the list and I'm just thinking there aren't 10 cake tests, right? So I'm not quite sure if these are assessments that the educators are utilizing. And I think there's a bit of misunderstanding.
So the
but
student may
cer-
be wrong and there are only 83 tests?
Well, I'm just thinking about what you listed. For example, you said there's
Yeah,
10
that's
cake
all.
tests and there
But
isn't.
she added it up to 93 tests.
Yeah. I think I'm just thinking about my experience as an elementary student, elementary teacher. I took a spelling test every Friday, right? If you calculate that over time, over 180 days, 9 weeks each quarter, 4 quarters a year, like it would be a large volume of spelling tests, right? So I think teachers have always given assessments, given quizzes, given tests. I think we utilize technology a lot more to provide those assessments, but teachers have always needed to assess for mastery and understanding. And I think we want to have the best tools in order for students to be able to do that.
Well-
Most of the assessments, just one second, and I'll turn to you. I think most of the assessments that you have mentioned are also very quick assessments that are not, administered for the entire day. Now, I will say CAPE is the most significant summative assessment that we have that is much larger in time, but it's not administered 10 times a year. And we have been responsive to this feedback and have had a history recently of reducing the number of assessments and modifying what's required centrally. And so we'll continue to assess that. But again, I think there's a misunderstanding, and I think there's always been assessments to inform instruction and mastery.
Well, I don't want to tell this fifth grader.
I would tell the fifth grader that be prepared to take an assessment in every faction of your life, probably for the rest of your life, right? Whether it's at your work, whether it's your higher education experience, there's often
I only go through a
assessment.
test once every 4 years.
You said you're on once every
I
4
only go
years.
through a test once every 4 years, an assessment once every 4
Yeah.
years.
Well, to get a driver's license, you're gonna have to take an assessment.
Okay, but not 93 in a year or 83 if you're going to pick on her 10 DC Cape tests. Maybe it's something else.
Yeah. Well, I think if you look at what good instruction includes, it includes assessment for mastery. And
Yeah,
I
but
think that's done, it's
so,
been done in classrooms
so I think,
forever.
I don't want to belabor this too much, but I think that we just hear too many complaints about there's just too much testing. And it just seems to me that if a teacher is good, he or she has a pretty good sense whether Johnny is where he or she God, Johnny would be a guy, where he needs to be in reading or where he needs to be in math. And constantly assessing 83 times a year. Just seems like too many. So, I mean, I'll just forewarn you, I'm looking again at whether we use the budget to put a little pressure on reducing the number of tests.
Yeah, I think
And
that,
iReady is in the sights because we get a lot of complaints about iReady and iReady, despite what you said earlier, not being aligned to CAPE, but being used on impact.
yeah, I think it'd be a big mistake. I mean, I think if you look at our results and outcomes, not many people are producing the outcomes we have. But I think it's something that we have evaluated, we continue to evaluate each year. And I think this idea that you got 83 assessments is an inflation. I think we've always had assessments. We just utilize technologies in different ways to assess.
So there recently was a class action lawsuit filed against the company that develops iReady.
Mhm.
What student data protection does DCPS have in its contract with iReady?
Yeah, so Dr. Ashley, I know his team works on the safety aspect of it, but I just want to be clear that we have no indication that any sensitive data has been compromised with iReady in terms of the allegations in that lawsuit.
Yeah, thanks. As part of the contracting process, we read and evaluate their terms and conditions in consultation with our general counsel as well as OAG, depending on the contract dollar amount, as well as in collaboration with our Office of Data and Technology to make sure that we're meeting all of the required standards, both local and then federal laws, and as well as making sure we're meeting our best practices as well. And that's done as part of any technology contract.
So you think that, you think that student data is protected?
I think that, you know, there's always a risk with any technology vendor that you have. You know, we have evaluated their terms and conditions. We have received assurances from them. We do quality control with them as well in any of our technology purchases.
Can you provide us a copy of the iReady contract?
Certainly.
And is it only one contract with them?
I would have to check. We can follow up with you with any of the contracts. We can get you whatever contracts we have.
Well, you only need to follow up by getting us to contract or contracts.
Yep.
Councilmember Fruman?
Thank you very much, Chairman Mendelson. I do think this continues to go to the idea of stepping back and looking at these technologies. I'm struck. We had a hearing on bold schools that was very interesting, and it was schools in DCPS and schools in the charter sector. And one of the lessons I think was doing assessments frequently to see where kids are so you can respond to where they are. So there's a balancing here, and there can be what are the methods, but how long are these assessments? What does that 83 really look like? And
Yeah.
what does it replace? I think is an important question for us to be looking at. But on the one hand, you hear from folks saying too many assessments, and on the other hand, you hear from folks saying the schools that are succeeding are monitoring where kids are and meeting them where they are in the moment. So I think it's a really important conversation for us to be having. I also, before moving to questions, I know we sent you or you got a whole bunch of questions about MacArthur High School and the status of the renovation, and you have responded to those questions. I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, so I do agree that it has been one of the tools that we benefit from in terms of improving student outcome, but we've also tried to strike the right balance and made adjustments. I want Dr. Bay to just speak to like what we've changed to be responsive to strike this balance.
Yeah, thank you, Chancellor. We've really been targeted in terms of, as was mentioned earlier, the breadth of assessments that we provide. We've made adjustments to the RCTs. I know in previous years, there was lots of feedback about the quantity of RCTs as well as the quality and how those RCTs are used. And so we've made adjustments in terms of the number of RCTs. We've partnered with our teachers and our instructional coaches in order to really analyze the quality of those RCTs to make sure that they are able to be used for the correct purpose. And so those are some of the things that we're continuing to do, and we'll continue to do that throughout. With the upcoming new CAPE 2.0 assessment that is coming, there will be assessments that come along or interim assessments that come along with that new assessment. And so we're in the process of looking at those and being able to analyze which of those assessments will we replace maybe with some of the assessments that we're currently using. So this is definitely a priority to make sure that we strike the balance in terms of the assessments that we use, what is no longer needed, and I think more importantly, how teachers are using the data from those assessments. Because if they are using the data from those assessments in order to inform their small needs-based small groups and their interventions, then we will ensure that the assessments are being used in the appropriate way.
Yeah, I guess my main point, and that's all interesting, is that we want to keep an eye on this. And there are different kinds of assessments. There's summative assessments, there's formal assessments, there's teachers who do, you know, like your spelling test thing where you can look at it and you can see, okay, well, this child is having trouble with the EA. And we want to get it right. We don't want to rely too heavily on a top-down technology. But for right now, it's, you know, how do we get it right? And how do we figure out how technology fits into our schools? How do we step back and think about that? I think that's an important question.
Yep, we'll keep our eye on it.
The only other thing that I would add to that in terms of the use of technology, I'm in schools every week. And what I see, both when I have announced visits as well as unannounced, is that the far majority of the time, students are engaged in direct instruction with their teacher, engaging in different types of activities, projects, things of that nature. And so it's definitely something that we're going to continue to keep an eye on and make sure that we are providing the appropriate guidance. But I think we're all on the same page in terms of making sure that we're monitoring that time. And when students are on a device, is it purposeful? Is it enhancing the instruction that they're getting in the classroom?
Okay. There's a $46 million decrease in central school-wide services. What's, maybe you've talked about this already, but that's a big number. What does that represent, that $46 million cut?
That is our fixed cost moving over to DGS largely.
So that's the utility bill.
Correct.
Okay. Why is there a decrease in special education extended school year placements? It looks like there's a sharp decrease in at-risk student projections and ELL student projections, including in that space. But why is there a decline in special education extended school year placements? Do you know?
Extended school year would be driven by students' IEP and services. So I would anticipate if there's a reduction there, that's a shift. But we talked earlier, there have been some downward trends for multilingual learners and at-risk students in DCPS. We continue to dig into that data. It's something that we'll monitor closely throughout this current school year that we're going into.
My impression is the decline, and I think I was doing other things but had you on, so I was reading the captions, but my impression is the decline is significantly larger at DCPS than it is in the charter schools. Is that right?
I think they're flat and we're projecting a downward trend. Now, what we see though is that there are certain populations and communities that have been impacted. So for example, we've had a higher number of overage high school students that were projected to decrease. Again, those students would be deemed at risk, and so that could be a driver. And as you know, we have more students in the traditional high school space in DCPS. But it's something I think we'll just need to continue to analyze.
Okay. How many FTEs approve field trips, and what's the typical? This is the thing I'm increasingly hearing about is the difficulty in getting field trips approved. What's the typical timeline for a field trip to be approved?
Let's speak to field trips.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it depends on the actual field trip. So if it's a local field trip, that is approved by the principal. As the trip is not local, if it goes outside of 50 miles, and that is something that is elevated to the instructional superintendent. And then for international field trips, those are elevated to my office. So I think it just depends on how quickly those items are submitted and in terms of feedback. I would say those that are at the school level, obviously those happen faster, but I have not heard in my office any concerns with the timeliness in terms of getting field trips approved.
Okay, and the principal for field trip in the District of Columbia, the principal doesn't have to come to DCPS Central at all.
Correct.
Okay. I think I'm gonna stop and thank you all very much. I had some question on food service, and Councilmember Henderson touched on some of it, but I do want to get on the record that I think it would be good if we increasingly move towards scratch cooking and doing it in-house. And I don't know, I think in response to her question, you said there isn't necessarily a move in that direction, but you continue to look at it. What kind of process do you use to look at a potential move to scratch cooking and in-house provision of meals?
Yeah, so Councilmember Henderson was asking about the update in kitchens and ovens. And was that an indication that we're moving to more in-house? And I shared it was not. It was just the age of the equipment. I think our ability to sustain in-house model and the costs associated with it are the key areas that we need to continue to dig into if we were to expand.
But I thought you did say that in response to that, that no, it isn't an indication of us moving in that direction, but we're continuously
That is correct.
evaluating it.
The budget items for purchasing equipment for kitchen is not an indication that we're growing now, but that door is still open.
And do you have any kind of process where you're looking at it, or it's just out there, but there's not an engagement on exploring that
There's
possibility?
not an engagement at this time because we're currently under contract for those schools.
Great. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. How much does DCPS have in its budget for supplies for athletic trainers?
We'll research that line item.
I think it's being researched as we speak.
I'm not that fast, but I'm sure it's being researched right now. But I will take the opportunity just to correct an earlier statement on the high quality instructional materials. You were referencing attachment I. That is something that is done collaboratively with our team. That was what you're referencing, the $5.6 million for that. That was an error on our part. We put the entire, what we projected for multi-year. And so the FY27 amount should have been that $846,000. So just wanted to correct my previous statement on that.
Everything you just said is consistent with the notes I took.
Great. And I don't have the amount for the athletic trainers, but we can follow up.
Well, I asked because athletic trainers are being told that there aren't funds to replace key equipment. And someone asked us to come up with some dollars to fund these needs. So I'd kind of like to know what's going on here.
Yeah, we've had some engagement with athletic trainers and regarding the key athletic equipment and really work to make sure that we're troubleshooting and addressing the needs that are outlined as part of the CBA as well as what's required. If there's specific cost items, we're happy to follow up with you on that. But we did make some efforts in the past fiscal year to make sure that there were some things that needed to be updated and some things that just as part of best practice we were replacing. So happy to hear if there's any specific items and we can address those.
Give me a second. Well, then if you would get back to us on this. So I guess the full question would be, how much does DCPS have in its budget for supplies for athletic trainers? And when you follow up and give us that answer, also tell us where it is
Sure.
in the budget.
Sure.
And
35. I will follow up with you, but it's $36,000 for equipment.
And then what's going on that we're getting complaints that athletic trainers are being told there aren't funds to replace key equipment. Is this a central or school support or school-wide?
Dr. Bay, I think this is school support as part of the DCIAA. Yep. And again, I think it would be helpful to hear what specific equipment and again, we could follow up offline on this is being needed or being requested. There are specific items that are outlined within the CBA some of those concerns have all been addressed throughout the year as part of our engagement with athletic trainers.
What am I looking at? First. Yeah, but who's this from? More troubling, athletic trainers used to operate under a medical model, reporting to a medical professional who made decisions based on best practices. That structure has been eliminated. Medical decisions are now made by the athletic director, an administrative position, with cost as the apparent priority. That is not how student health and safety should work. Our three asks are: one, equipment maintenance line item, dedicated protected funding for the upkeep, recalibration, repair, and replacement of athletic training equipment each year. Cost estimate $10,000. Two, red bag replacement line item, funding to replace emergency supplies that are used or expired, so our trauma and emergency kits are always game ready. Cost estimate $5,000. Three, medical oversight position, restoration of a medical professional role that athletic trainers report to for clinical decisions, removing the authority from the athletic director. Cost estimate $150,000 for standalone position or $30,000 for additional duties position. That was not all part of my original question. So if you guys could follow up on that,
Sure, we're happy to.
and if you need some of that repeated, Mr. Verlin, Scott.
Great, thank you.
Why are there fewer connected schools projected for FY27?
If I got that question earlier, we had 6 schools less this coming year, and they were all decisions made by school leaders. It doesn't mean that they're abandoning all of the strategies, it just means that they are investing in other ways and may incorporate some of the strategies, but the support centrally will remain the same for this upcoming school year. And again, schools are not mandated to be connected schools. They choose to do so.
So your testimony is that 6 schools, the principals, the school leaders, decided to invest in other ways.
Correct.
How much does it cost a school?
I think the primary cost is the FTE.
Yeah, so the Connected Schools Manager is just under $140,000. We also recommend to schools in terms of non-personnel funds to budget anywhere from $25,000 to $90,000. So that number is going to be different school by school, depending on what they are setting those funds aside for. But the total, if you include the Connected Schools Manager as well as the NPS, ranges from about $185,000 to $230,000.
185 to 235?
To 230, yes, on average.
So principal's looking at his or her budget and says, 6 of them said, we'd rather put that $235,000 to something else. I'm understanding that correctly?
Yes, that's the direction.
But are there other schools that would like to be connected schools?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any schools that wants to be a connected school that hasn't, raised their hand, and we haven't had that discussion. But again, these are decisions that principals make in collaboration with their local school advisory teams.
So there are no schools on a waiting list, so to speak.
Correct. Now, if a school doesn't have the resources, they can make a budget assistance request for this particular resource as part of our budget assistance process when schools identify gaps in their allocation. And we've provided budget assistance for 4 schools that were receiving federal grants for their connected school models. That was Henley, Kimball, Malcolm X, and Turner elementary schools. So as a result of them losing the federal dollars, we gave them budget assistance so they can maintain the programming.
So my notes here say your budget for the current year is $529,000. Is that in central or school support or school-wide?
We'll get you the category. The number sounds right, though.
You don't know which of the buckets it's in.
I think it's school-wide, but we'll follow up.
And then,
Sorry, school support.
for FY27, my notes say that you have 647,000 budgeted.
That's correct.
That's correct.
And that's for, even though the money may be in school support, I'm going to say that's for Central to provide additional support to these schools.
Correct.
Give me a sec. The mayor's proposed budget support act proposes to repeal the alternative breakfast program, which helps support grab-and-go breakfasts. My understanding is this is funded through OSSI, but it supports your schools. Do you know which DCPS schools participate in the program?
Not entirely sure.
You know what I'm talking about?
So
Be honest, I don't know what I'm talking about. Do you know what?
yeah, so the Grab and Go Breakfast program allows kids to grab breakfast and take it to their classroom and eat if they come to school early. It does support a number of our schools. We'll have to follow up with you specifically on how many schools that supports and what the dollar amount looks like.
When you follow up, can you also give a sense of the level of participation in the program?
Sure, we can definitely.
So let's say it's Thompson Elementary School. Okay, that answers part of it. And let's say it's 2 students who participate in it,
Sure,
or there are 102 students who participate in it.
we can certainly follow.
Are you concerned about losing the program?
Yeah, man, I think majority of our schools are participants. I just don't know the level that students participate. Given what I see in schools, I don't know that I would say it is high utilization, but I think something we'll keep our eye on.
You'll get back to me on this with some data. Last year, which I think means for the current year, we budgeted 3 positions at DCPS to support New Heights. You cut those funds. Why?
Again, we don't see numbers that we've seen historically for parenting and students who need these supports. So we just believe that we don't need the level of support that we've had in the past.
Are you zeroing out the program for 27?
I don't think we're zeroing out the program. I think it's our recommendation that we reduce the number of staff associated with the program.
Yeah, we're actually shifting the way in which we coach and support the PLCs, the local PLCs at the schools, to our Connected Schools team. We feel as though they have the capacity in terms of identifying resources and providing supports at the school level. And so what we anticipate is that schools will still receive the resources and services and coaching that they need in order to support their parenting students.
So schools will not see a change in terms of their ability.
They won't see a change in their ability to be able to meet the needs of their students. The coaching and support will come from another office in terms of our Connected Schools team. But we don't anticipate that this will interrupt services to students.
So the Connected Schools team will see additional work.
The Connected Schools team has capacity to support the POCs at schools.
Do you know how much you have budgeted for New Heights in FY27?
So in terms of actual positions, we have not budgeted additional positions.
Correct.
Right,
I understand that you
Okay.
eliminated 3 positions,
correct. So, correct.
but you still have a budget for this, or it's just absorbed into the Connected Schools?
It's
budget?
absorbed into the Connected Schools team.
And again, I think this is an area where we're right sizing to the need. We just don't need the volume of personnel to support this student population. This population has been significantly decreasing over time.
I want to go back to experiential learning. So if I remember correctly, we put several $100,000 into OSSI's budget for them to contract, and that schools can then, I'm not quite sure how it works. I guess contact whatever that OSSI office is or whoever the vendor is for trips, school trips. How is that working for DCPS?
You referred to when there was advocacy around students with IEPs not having
No,
access?
no, I'm not talking about IEP, experiential learning, school trips, experiences.
Are you talking about
Live it-
Bridge the Gap?
Live it, learn
Live
it,
and
I
Learn
think
It?
is the vendor.
Yeah.
Am I what?
You talking about Live It, Learn It?
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't heard any concerns.
Do you think it's working well?
Yeah, I don't have any reason to believe it's not. We haven't had any, they haven't reached out to us recently with any concerns to raise, nor have we heard that from schools.
Can you say more about these new initiatives? You identified $600,000 for AI literacy and instructional innovation.
Yeah, so that's what I mentioned earlier, where we are trying to build out a team that directly supports the integration of artificial intelligence. We also continue to invest in literacy strategies as well. We also are expanding the work that we do with the DCPS reading clinic, as you know, as well.
But the reading clinic and what was the second one, literacy?
So, yeah, so the artificial intelligence and AI literacy is to create FTEs and supports for a team that has a sole focus on integrating artificial intelligence into how students learn and also how our educators learn and respond.
Is any of the 600,000, is 600,000 the right amount? As in, am I understanding that this
I
initiative will
think
cost
the
600,000?
600,000 is more. I think is incorporating other aspects of literacy.
Is it all personnel or is it does it include a contract?
For the artificial intelligence, that's all personnel. For the literacy, I don't believe that's a contract either.
Yeah, it's a total of 6 personnel for the literacy and then 2 for the AI.
And what are the two AI folks doing?
Okay.
I think as the chancellor mentioned, I think we're trying to think about AI and what the future of AI looks like. And so these are folks that are really helping to think about AI literacy, but more importantly, or equally as important, is also about what does AI policy and governance look like in the system? How do we make sure that we're responsibly using AI? We know that it's coming, and we know that our students and our staff are going to be exposed to it. And so how do we make sure that they're literate about it, and also that we have policy guardrails and says, this is how you can use it responsibly, and making sure that we have those data safeguards in place to make sure that, we don't want folks using AI in ways in which that could compromise our student data, our student privacy, or internal data as well.
You've identified, I think the number is $8.1 million in expanded after-school programming. Is this new funding?
Yeah, so it's a combination of some of it is new funding, or increased investments. And so there's about $3.9 million of that that goes to support athletics. 0.7 or 700,000 that goes towards supporting some expansion of athletics and after school programming in middle school. Some $1.5 million of federal funds to support extended learning and after school staff, and then also sixth grade academy as well.
So that's about 2 million for the sixth grade academy.
Yeah, so $3.9 million for athletics, 700,000 for expansion of after school athletics and middle school extracurricular programming, $1.5 million for extended learning, $400,000 for after school staffing, $1.3 million for extended learning staff, and then about $300,000 for sixth grade academy staff.
And that's all new
That's
money?
not all new. That's just our overall investment in the programming.
So I got this number from a letter the chancellor sent to schools highlighting new initiatives.
Yeah, so some of that new initiative specifically is some of the middle school programming and athletics that we're planning on rolling out.
So some of it's just continuing an existing program.
Correct.
So how much of this is new?
About $1.2 million is new.
You identified $700,000 to strengthen dual enrollment. How many students will be able to participate and at what schools? And is there a criteria for participation?
We're super excited about the expansion of dual enrollment. We are able to invest in such that all of our schools will be able to offer at a minimum 6 additional dual enrollment courses, with schools raising their hand to offer even more than that. In terms of the number, so for each course, each section, there's a max of 15 students that are in each section. So I'd have to get you more details in terms of the total number. But our schools, our students, our families are super excited about the opportunity, and the outcomes that we've seen thus far have been really, really promising. We are seeing more and more students raise their hand to participate, and they're doing really well in those courses and earning those credits.
So I heard you say all schools.
I'm sorry, all high schools.
And I
All-
heard you say 6 additional courses in each, or
In-
6 courses in.
6 courses minimum. If a school raises their hand and that they want to offer more, we are going to support them with that, but at minimum 6 per
So
school.
if it's a high school, there'll be dual enrollment.
Correct.
And I think you said 6 students per course.
15, up to 15 per course or per section.
And that's going to cost 700,000.
That's correct.
Impact. My impression is that impact is costing more and more every year. Am I wrong?
It's actually gone down. So I think 2 fiscal years, 27 million. I think it's down $1.1 million this year from the previous fiscal year. So the 3 years I've been here, it's actually come down, I believe, every year slightly.
I think you're thinking about post-pandemic, and during the pandemic, we did see increases, but those are also years where we modified the criteria for the impact review process.
So I think you said it's down 1.7 million. FY27 is down from FY26.
$1.1 million down.
And this is always a little bit weird in the sense that the bonuses are paid in December for the previous school year.
That's
That's
correct.
So the 1.1 million is what will be paid in December for performance this school year that we're in right now.
Yes.
And when I say my impression is it's been going up, I'm just wrong.
There was a time period where it was increasing, so I don't
I'm
want
not going to
to,
be wrong.
I don't want to discount what you were saying there, but most recently it is on the decline.
I'm struggling here. I've run out of questions and I know you're good for another couple hours. As I said, I've run out of questions. I trust somebody's been taking notes on what you're getting back on.
Yes,
Okay, and hopefully that'll be within the week. And that doesn't mean by today's Friday, that doesn't mean by tomorrow, but that means very soon.
yes, we'll work to get you the follow-ups as soon as possible.
All right, then I'm going to close out this hearing. The committee of the whole will be having the next education-related budget hearing next Thursday, May 7th. Then we will hear testimony on OSSI. And I don't think I'll go through all the other hearings. I want to thank the witnesses who testified last week. That was all the public witnesses. And Chancellor Farabee and your team, thank you. The time is 2:01 p.m. and this hearing is adjourned.
Thank you.